suicide prevention, and how to create a safety plan so that you can prevent it from happening. Now, this episode may not be for you, but it may be for someone that you love, which is why it's important for you to listen to this entire episode so that way you can share it with them, whether you give them the episode or you give them the information that's from this episode to help them to prevent taking their own life. Suicide is something that is very real in our world. I can't tell you how many people I've come across who have told me they had the thoughts, or maybe they even tried. And as a result, they feel as though they're in this stuck place where no one gets them. And I want to tell you guys that suicide is something that is very real. A lot of people tend to have the thoughts, and there's a population of people who have actually tried to take their own life. And you'd be surprised how many successful people that you know that either had the thoughts or have attempted to take their own life. One of the person that comes to mind right now is actually Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is doing a podcast episode with the show called I Am Athlete with Brandon Marshall. I believe that's the name of the show, but it is Brandon Marshall's podcast, the football player. And talking through Deion Sanders' prime time, he tells them that he had all the money. He had all the cars, all the materialistic things. But when his kids was taken away from him, that put him at a low point. And it was at that low point, he actually started thinking about taking his own life. And I say that, and I give that story because a lot of people think that suicide is something that happens to, let's say, the misfortunate, right? People who don't make a lot of money, people that are your everyday Joe Schmo people, right? But no, this affects everybody, right? So many different people. And that's why, again, this episode is so important. Now, I want to make a side note. As I'm giving information about suicide prevention, I am giving this from the perspective of a licensed therapist, yes, but also from the state of Florida, because there's one law that I'm going to go over that is here in Florida, but it may be something very similar to where you are. So if you're in Las Vegas or if you're in Iowa or anything like that, even if you're across the pond in Europe and you're listening to this episode, there may be a policy just like the one that I'm going to go over. All right, so I just want to say that. Now, also at the end, I'm gonna give you guys a real simple technique, one that's simple but yet powerful, something that I give to my clients to help them if they're ever feeling depressed, okay? So I want you guys to stay around to listen to the technique. Now, I started my career off as a high school counselor, and this was actually the first time I actually came across someone who outwardly told me that they were feeling suicidal. I remember it was one day, I was working in the 9th grade wing, and it was about 2 o'clock, and school ends at 3. So at about 2 o'clock, so at the end of the day, I had a teacher bring a student to me who was visibly upset. And they just simply said, Coach Wells, or Mr. Wells at the time, I need you to speak to this young lady, okay? She needs to talk to you. And I thought nothing of it. I thought, hey, maybe she broke up with her boyfriend, or maybe some girls are gossiping about her, kind of like little kid stuff. I hate to say little kid, but you know what I'm saying. So we started talking, and one thing that I realized is that this student was actually very bright. This student was actually so bright that they were actually ranked number 9th in a class of 500. So they were in the top 1% of the school. And we started talking, and when I got to the bottom of it, I realized why she was feeling depressed and suicidal. And the reason why, believe it or not, was because she wasn't number 1. In high school settings, and this is probably something that's very real in life in general, but in the high school setting, when kids are at that type of caliber, right, high performers, they tend to get very competitive, and their results tend to define who they are. So if someone is number 9 and not number 1, that may communicate to them that they are not good enough, because if they were, they'll be number 1 in the class. And what this does to that person is that it crushes their spirit, and they're now starting to think about their self-worth. It's crazy, right? Like, you're thinking about, man, this student who is by far one of the brightest minds in the school, a student that could probably go to any school in the state of Florida, in the country probably, and get a scholarship, or even just simply get accepted, right? Like, they're having thoughts of taking their own life because they feel that they're not worth it. And this is a testament to how the mind can manipulate and play games on anyone at any time. Because I'm sure there are times that you've seen someone who may have been very in shape, very pretty, right? Very wealthy or successful. And when you speak to them, they tell you that they're not pretty enough. They're not successful enough. They're not in shape enough. But from our view, they're definitely in the top percent in those categories. And that's something that the mind does. Like, the mind has this way of telling you stories about what it is that you see. The mind has a way of putting these glasses in front of you, and showing you that what you see isn't something that's green, but it's pink, right? We call these rose colored glasses. And I tend to tell my clients that this is how the mind treats us at times. And I want to give you guys the story, not just of Deion Sanders, not just of the high performer that I experienced in the high school setting, but this is a story that a lot of people live. It's a story of people who, from the outside, looks like they're doing fine, but deep down, they're struggling just like you, just like me, right? Like we all have these struggles. But when you lack that support, when you don't have a system, when you do not have the strategies to get you out of this hole, it can be very hard. And that's what this podcast is all about. So again, this podcast may be for you, but it may be for someone else. And you may actually have the ability to save someone's life. As a matter of fact, I'll add this one thing before I actually get into the meat of the podcast, where I help you guys to put a plan together. I actually had one student who at one time was suicidal actually talk to me about another friend at an entirely different school who was suicidal. And from us speaking, we were actually able to get them the help that they need by using one of the strategies that I want to talk to you guys about. And we ended up saving that person's life. That's the power of these podcasts, right? That's the power of knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. And that's why I want to give you guys this episode. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in and start creating this safety plan for you. So suicide comes in a few different forms, if you will, right? In terms of the level of severity. And I want to talk about first, passive suicidal thoughts. These are thoughts what people have when they say things like, I wish I wasn't here, or, it'd be curious, or I'd be curious what would happen if I didn't hit the brakes, right, while they're driving. Or they may say things like, well, if this truck that's behind me going 90 miles an hour, if it didn't stop, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, right? Like these are passive thoughts. And what makes them passive is that they have the thoughts of them not being here, right, in the physical tense, right? But what they're not saying is that this is how I would do it. This is the plan, and I have access to that actual plan. That doesn't exist when someone is saying that they're having these passive thoughts of suicide. The reason why I say this is because if someone's having passive suicidal thoughts, it is important, and it may, right, because I don't want to make it black and white, but it may warrant going through some of these plans I'm going to go through. But something I definitely would suggest is taking them to see a therapist. Even at that moment, even at that time, and you'll see this as I go through the plan, it wouldn't be a bad idea to actually give the suicide hotline a call. This is something that can definitely save a life and prevent something from becoming more severe. So again, passive suicidal thoughts, that is something that is important. It's something to monitor. And also it's not something that is deep or as serious as someone who has a plan and has access to that plan, okay? So again, it is important, it is serious, but it's not as serious as someone who has an actual plan. So I want to say that first. Now, getting into the plan, and I'm going to do this with you live, okay? We're going to create a plan together. And this is why it's so important to share this episode. So what I have all my clients do who've had a history of suicidal thoughts, actions, attempts, if you will, even clients who are currently suicidal, I have them all download this app called the Suicide Safety Plan app, okay? The Suicide Safety Plan app. And I'm showing you guys what the app actually looks like, okay? So I'm gonna show you on my phone. It is the one with the blue and white cross. So we know the cross from when we go to like the hospital, we see them on ambulances. This one has a blue and white cross instead of a red and white one, okay? So I want you guys to download that. Now, when you download it, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in and we're gonna create a plan, first starting off with where it says warning signs, okay? And I know I'm trying to show you guys on my phone, it says warning signs. There you go. Now, if you need to pause this so that way you can get the app updated, loaded, all that stuff, please do that and then hit play. So what I have my clients do is go in here and tap the warning signs. And what we do is we write a quick list of what all your warning signs are that you're starting to have suicidal thoughts or that you're about to go and commit or die by suicide. And the questions that I ask here is, what sort of thoughts, images, moods, situations of behavior indicate to you that a crisis may be developing? Because we want to get ahead of this. We don't want to wait until it's 3 a.m. in the morning. Everyone's asleep. We're running through our mind. We can't escape our thoughts. And we think that the only way to do that is to harm ourselves. We do not want to wait until that happens. So we want to get ahead of this. And we do that by coming up with the warning signs. Now, here's something that I love saying when it comes to these plans. This plan is only as powerful as much detail you put into it. It's like a bank account. If I put $1 million into that bank account, I can take out $1 million. If I put $1 in there, I'm gonna get $1 back. So if you're lazy, if you're not specific, if you're not being very detailed when creating this plan, when you look at it in a time of need, it's not gonna pull on you emotionally to make you not wanna go and die by suicide, go through with these self-harm plans, things like that, okay? Now, I should say this about self-harm. Self-harm, something that we've been taught, is that self-harm and suicide, those are in two different categories. Those are in two different boats. Someone can definitely harm themselves, but not actually be ready to die by suicide, okay? Like there is a line between the two. Now, if someone is harming themselves, we definitely want to see if they're thinking about taking their own life. But something like, let's say, cutting their wrists, cutting their thighs, things like that, doesn't necessarily constitute a suicidal plan, if you will. A plan should be in place, but not necessarily a suicidal plan, okay? So what you can do is you can take a moment, press pause, and input some of your warning signs, and hit play when you're ready to go to the next section. All right, so assuming that you've done that, the next section is coping strategies, okay? Coping strategies. So the second one, coping strategies. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna tap here, and it says, what are some of the things that you can do on your own to help you to not act on thoughts or urges to harm yourself? Again, be very specific, guys. Do not leave anything out. Now, I wanna pause and say this. Guys, the great thing about having an app that can do all this is that I know you're not gonna leave your phone. Everywhere you go, you're gonna have your phone with you, right? And even if you have Apple Watches, a MacBook, an iPad Pro, because all your apps are synced, there's a good chance that this will be synced to those products as well. And it's the same thing if you have Android. Those apps, they tend to sync together. All right, so this is why it's so important that you guys download this app, and also tell your friends to download it if they're having suicidal thoughts. All right, the next part we're gonna add is the reasons to live. And again, you can press pause and unpause it as you're putting this stuff in, but reasons to live. So what are some of the reasons, some of the important things to you that are worth living? This may come in terms of people. This may come in terms of your career, your business, right? There's so many things that are important to you, and I want you to add these and even explain why these are important. Think about what life would be like if you weren't here. Think about how many people would be heartbroken if you were not here, okay? And we know that to be true because I know that you've experienced grief. That's something that we've all experienced, and we know what it feels like to not have that special loved one here with us anymore. And I don't think that you want to put anyone else through that as well. Now, here's a big reason that a lot of people add, and it's their spirituality, it's their religion. Because based on their religion, a lot of them are Christians that I meet with, but a lot of people, based on their religion, it'll be a sin, it'll be a bad thing, whatever they call it, to take their own life. And as a result, they won't make it into the heaven or magical place, whatever it is that they go. They will not make it into those gates. And because of that, they're afraid to actually take their own life, which is a big reason that stops people from dying by suicide. All right, next we have the contacts. All right, so you can add the contacts of the people that you can call at any given time to help you during these tough times, right? Brother, sister, friends. It could be mentors, may even be your own therapist. Add those people to the next section as well. After that, we have places for distractions, okay? So this will be the fifth one, okay? Places for distractions. You can add that and ask yourself, where do I go where I typically feel safe? Where it's hard for me to access things that may be life endangering, if you will, right? So this may be, let's say, a park, right? This may be a best friend's house. So many different places. But what are the places that you can go to help you to not think or die by suicide, okay? And then there's the last place that says other, where you can add other things. Now, there's a guide on the second tab, all right? So it was on this first tab, okay? It was on this first tab, and now we're on the second tab that says guide. It would actually help you to answer a lot of those questions, okay? And I would suggest that you guys read those and actually go back and edit if you see opportunities to edit and make your plan more specific. Now, my favorite part of this app is the last page, okay? So on the third page right here, right? If you click at the bottom, as you can see, you have all of these helplines, okay? So you have an emergency helpline, so that would just simply be 911. But also you have the suicide hotline that you can call at any given time to help talk to you to make sure that you're okay. All right. You also have a text line. But then what's really great is that this app would use your location to show you the nearby hospitals and really like care places, right? To help you to be able to go and do what's called a Baker Act, okay? And this is going to take me to the next section that I want to talk to you guys about. So let's say you or someone that you know is right now trying to actively die by suicide. They're actively trying to go. They're telling you goodbye, thank you for all that you've done. And even a big sign is when people start to give away possessions, especially within little kids. But anyone, if they're starting to give away possessions, large sums of money, that also may be a sign that someone's thinking about taking their own life. But if you know someone that's about to take their own life, there's this thing in Florida that's called a Baker Act, okay? A Baker Act. So like you're baking a cake and act as if you're acting in a play. So a Baker Act. What a Baker Act is a law here in Florida where law enforcement will come to your house and they will transport that person to the hospital so that it can be evaluated by licensed therapists and licensed psychiatrists to make sure that they're safe and that when they leave the hospital, they're no longer in threat to themselves or even to others. I've done this so many times as a high school counselor and even as an own private therapist, where I've had to call the law enforcement, come and they will transport this person to the hospital and they'll stay there, whether it's for a day, it may be for a few days. And during that time, they're meeting with the therapist, they're meeting in group therapy. And at the end, when they're released, they're giving a list of resources throughout the community. This is something that has literally saved hundreds of thousands and even millions of lives. And it's a great resource to know, especially if you're new to Florida. But even if you're not new to Florida, you may not have known about this law. This is something that will save someone's life. And if you're not in the state of Florida, this is where I said there may be a law similar in whatever state, whatever country that you are, that would help save that person's life. And for us, it's called the Baker Act. So you can call it for yourself or you can call it for a loved one. So that right there is the Suicide Safety Plan app. And those are all the wonderful, amazing things that you can use with it. Now, aside from the app and aside from the Baker Act, there's other things that you can do. Something that I've done a few times as a therapist as well is where I did something called a wellness check. So a wellness check is where you can have law enforcement go to someone's house, knock on the door, and just simply ask the person questions that the person in question questions to see if they're in the right state of mind, to see if they're having thoughts of taking their own life. Now, with this Baker Act, right, with this wellness check, if you will, so this is a wellness check. So the difference between a wellness check and a Baker Act is that the wellness check is just simply the police officers going to the home, going to the place, and seeing if that person is well. Now, if they determine that that person is not well, they will then initiate a Baker Act and take that person to the hospital, okay? So if you ever see someone posting on Instagram, posting on Facebook, saying that they're going to take their own life, they're posting images with them with a gun, or they're posting images of a noose or anything like that, that is when you will call a wellness check. So what you would do is just call local law enforcement, tell them, hey, I have a friend, I have a coworker, or whoever that I have great concern with. I need you to go do a wellness check on them. Now, what's great about this is that sometimes they may not even need the address. So long as they have the name, what they can do is they can look up that address per light bill or water bill for that city, okay? So I just wanted to throw that out there. But if you do have the address, great. That's great. So wellness checks, huge lifesaver. Now, let's go back, right? Let's go back to people who are having passive suicidal thoughts, right? And even people that had suicidal thoughts and they are just not getting released from the hospital. I want to give you guys a few websites that you can go to actually find a therapist so that way we can prevent ourselves from getting to that level of depression, okay? So one of my favorites, the one that I'm actually located on as we speak, is a website called Hello Alma. Okay, so hello like you're waving to someone, and Alma, ALMA. This is a great resource where you can find high-level therapists that you can request a consultation with and potentially see if they're a good fit for you. Okay, and what I love about this platform is that, again, you can actually request and book the consultation before even speaking with them. So you can read their profile and see if they're a good fit and go ahead and get the consultation requested. Another great website is called Psychology Today, and this is the one that I'm still on, and it's the one that almost every therapist is on. So you can think of this as like the yellow pages for therapists, if you will. So you can go on there, and what's great about this website and even the previous website is that you can put in so many different filters for it to spit out the perfect therapist for you. So if you want to see someone of color, someone that is a male, someone that is a Christian, and someone that specializes in depression, you could put all that information in and it will spit out the therapist for you. Even if you want to add in the insurance or the out-of-pocket fees that you're willing to spend, it will give you the right therapist for you, okay? So that's another great website. Another one is just simply talking to your doctor's office, your EAP office, contacting your insurance companies. And then also another website is called Headway, okay? Headway. And then I'll even give this one. If you're financially in a tough bind, Open Path, okay? Open Path is a great website for people who have low income, okay? So those are some great ways. Now, guys, I'm glad you made it this far. And as promised, I'm gonna go over one technique that I give a lot of my clients in therapy if they're ever struggling with depression. And this technique is called behavioral activation. Now, as you can see from this image here, what tends to happen when someone is feeling depressed is that they allow these feelings to then dictate what actions they then take. And the actions that people tend to take when they're depressed may be staying on the couch, right? Watching Netflix all day, scrolling through Instagram or Twitter all day, right? Not going to the gym, just basically being a shell of themselves. And when you're not doing things that are meaningful for you, there's no way you're going to feel meaning. There's no way you're going to feel fulfillment. And there's no possible way that you're going to get back to a level of peace and happiness that you're looking for. So what this does is it creates a very nasty cycle. And if you don't have awareness that you're in this cycle, you may be stuck here for years on end. You may find yourself actually jumping into these suicidal thoughts and having these passive or these plans, if you will, of taking your own life. And you do not have to get there. So the technique that I give, as you can see here, is that behavior activation. The idea is that when you do something that matters, you are able to break this cycle, because when you do something that matters to you, it starts to reinforce this idea of self-worth. You start to feel better about yourself. You start to see that life doesn't have to stop and end with this feeling, but there's so many other things outside of how I feel that I can actually be attracted to, that I can attach myself to. So if you're feeling depressed, let's use behavior activation, and maybe we go for a jog. Maybe we have a game night. Maybe we actually go and call that therapist that someone referred to us a week ago. There's so many different things that you can do to add meaning to your life. Even the idea of giving back to others, that is a big one. If you were to sit in a class and read a book to a group of kindergartners, trust me, you will not feel that same emotion that you did when you walk into that door. And that's just the art of giving back, right? The art of volunteering. So behavior activation, what you can actually do is you can go to Google right now, type in behavior activation, click images, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. It's a simple step-by-step process of what you can do. So with that being said, guys, this is a behavioral safety plan. This is a suicide safety plan that is guaranteed to help you guys. If this episode is not for you, share it with someone that you know. And I'll even say, keep this in your back pocket. If you do everything that I've talked about, not just in this podcast episode, but previous episodes, you won't find yourself in this space. But if you do, please know that this episode, it will have the potential to save your life. So this is Coach Wells, and I have one question for you. Why don't you subscribe to this podcast?